People are always telling me you could go real-world racing for less than you spent on your sim rig. So I thought, let's find out. A cold and windy Donington Park is my introduction to the car that I'll be racing along with 3 other drivers in the 2022 EnduroKa Championship. It's clearly modest machinery, and with the cost split between the 4 drivers, it feels fairly low impact, at least by motorsport standards. But even then, you still need to build, prepare, support and transport the car, pass your licensing test and obtain all of the required safety equipment, not to mention anything about the racing itself, which, being endurance racing, adds another level of complexity. And given our complete lack of race car building experience, we took some sage advice and decided to talk to Frank.
I'm Frank, I'm with Graves Motorsport.
We hired Graves Motorsport to build, prepare and maintain our car for the season.
So essentially it is the same shell that the road going car is. It's got a roll cage in it, fire extinguisher, bucket seat, harness, coilover suspension by Gaz, standard brakes but with Mintex pads. But other than that, it's essentially what you would come in as a standard Haye.
With no engine modifications allowed, horsepower is somewhat limited.
Oh, if you get 69 out of it, then you're lucky.
With power at an absolute premium, clearly this car is all about momentum. Thankfully, our little orange menace is shod with semi-slick tyres and it weighs about half as much as a very light thing, so it absolutely flies in the corners. Of course, slow on the straights, fast in the corners means not a lot of braking needs to happen, which means we get to play a game of how fast can we take this corner without dying. The EnduroKa season will be taking us to some of Britain's best loved circuits, and the endurance part of the bargain is fulfilled by a variety of race formats, starting with 5 and 6 hour events at the beginning of the season and culminating with the 24 hours of Anglesey and the IndyCar 500, which is, of course, 500 laps of the Brands Hatch Indy circuit. So, as the title goes, small car, big racing, but what about the cost?
If you do this with a group of you, which is what it's intended for, and you split that cost between us, then without a doubt it is one of the cheapest ways of going racing.
Since splitting the cost is fundamental to the plan, you should probably meet the team.
I'm Toby Owen, hail from Birmingham in the Midlands.
My name's Darren S. Cook. I am currently from Kettering and I'm racing with the Gridfinder EnduroKa. EnduroKa or EnduroKa?
An important question, and one that I'm not sure we're going to be able to answer definitively during this series. Darren is a professional filmmaker and is documenting our EnduroKa journey for a separate documentary. In fact, any of the footage that looks good in this video is probably down to him. Toby and Darren are both experienced club racers, but there are 2 of us that have yet to see our first start lights on a real racetrack.
Hi, I'm Tom, founder of Gridfinder. We started in sim racing and now we're venturing into motorsport, which is why we're here.
And then there's me.
I've come into this project through knowing Tom. We've all sort of come together to have this crazy endurance racing dream realised in real life, something that honestly, as life progressed, I didn't think was going to happen, but here we are.
Okay, so it's not exactly Le Mans, but there is something to be said for the club racing equivalent.
Club motorsport is very different from the glitz and glamour of Formula One that you see on the TV. You know, you've got people who might work on their own cars, they'll spend hours in a night up to midnight loading their car onto the trailer, bring it down on the back of a van, they'll probably sleep in the van. And then when they wake up in the morning, the whole paddock, even with that lack of sleep, is still the most welcoming and buzzing place you will ever come across.
First race is in Donington in April, so we're just here doing a track day just to kind of get our eye in, first time in a real car, to try and find some kind of pace and see how much of our sim racing experience translates into real world racing.
For Tom and myself, that's obviously the big question, but the other guys are no strangers to sim racing themselves.
I think we're all taking it quite seriously, but at the same time, we are all here to enjoy it. So we're all preparing for it on the sim, and I think that gives us probably a head up over some of the other drivers who might be turning up a bit cold to a race weekend.
Like Toby, Darren also found himself drawn into the world of sim racing during the COVID lockdowns.
Sim racing was probably an evil necessity. I was a big Gran Turismo Sport PS4 guy. I liked it because it was a lot of fun, but I was finding that more and more of my mates were meeting and talking and kind of really working together on sims. And I'm not going to lie, I find it frustrating. There's a massive difference between sim racing and real life racing.
And those differences were starting to become clear, even to a diehard sim racer like myself.
I've driven cars on tracks before, but not quite pushing to this limit and preparing for a race type event. There are a few things that have sort of worked themselves loose a little bit in the crossover between sim racing and real world racing that I just don't think I picked up on before just by doing track days and the like. There's a lot of nuance to the way a car feels as it's approaching the grip limit, which I think is just quite absent in sim racing. You get a lot of it around the grip limit and over it through the wheel, but it's those little nuanced details that sort of tell you what's going on.
We started off fairly slow, but actually I think the pace has increased, especially between myself and Chris, quicker than I was expecting. And there have been some translations from sim racing to real racing, but obviously there's some huge differences, and that's obviously what we need to iron out for the rest of the day. The fear factor. The fear factor is the real thing.
I have a huge amount of respect for sim racers who can do what they do, because I hear the term alien used a hell of a lot, and I admire how they can set up race and constantly put in those kind of performances online. It's impressive.
Not being an alien, I wouldn't know, but clearly there's more to the challenge than driving with consistency and competency.
It's confidence. We've all been there. It's your confidence, braking a little bit later, going to the corner, hitting the apex and flooring it, going out the corner, and just having that commitment to make a lap stick.
Confidence is the main thing, commitment. Like, there's probably a lot of other C words in there as well.
What sim racing can't prepare you for is the fear of committing to a corner, wondering if the tyres are going to hold on, and listening to the sound of the tyres through the windscreen as you're going around a corner slightly faster than you intended.
By the end of the season, I'm pretty confident the team will be all operating on a similar pace, but in the first few rounds, there is going to be that noticeable gap in experience, particularly in racecraft, I think, between the experienced guys and the newcomers.
The intention is this time that first lap, you just sort of get yourself back into the rhythm, and then from then on, I will be pushing you and you will hate me.
No, that's good.
but I'm basically just going to tell you where you can go faster.
Great, yeah.
So clearly, there's plenty of work to do. But with 13 red flags curtailing running during the session, that challenge just gets a little bigger.
To be back in the car this morning with Tom has been absolutely incredible. It's been really nice helping him develop and really bring his time down. And the guy can drive, and there's definitely a want and a like to perform and do well. And you can see that definitely in Chris and Tom this morning. They really want to succeed.
Yeah, it's the team thing. It's not wanting to let other people down. It's not wanting to let myself down. I want to do the absolute best I can. And also there's professional pride at stake here. You know, I've been doing this in a very similar field professionally for a number of years now, so I've got to get it right.
I think Chris has taken to it really well. I think he seems to have just jumped in, and after the first session where he kind of learned all the differences I've just identified, I think he's very quickly got to a stage where he's not just trying to survive, he's actually trying to kind of beat tenths off of his time. So I think he's adapted to it rapidly.
But while us newcomers are clearly competitive, the reality of endurance racing is a little different.
I think round one at Donington, when we're back here in a month's time, I think we should be looking to finish the race. And honestly, I don't care where we finish. I think everyone needs that experience under their belt of completing full race distance.
And there it is, 3 simple words: full race distance. I can't wait.